the Chase Thomas Podcast, for people who have nothing but time to kill.
In the comment section. And of course, if you ever want to get in touch with the show and ask us anything about college football each and every week, you can hit us up at chasethomaspodcast@gmail.com. Matt Green, the Georgia Bulldogs, they had a dog bites this week. They had a spring game along with Tennessee up there in Athens, Georgia. What happened this weekend? What were your takeaways from Georgia's G-Day?
Well, there's only so much you can take away from these spring games. If the offense looks good, is that because our DBs are bad? If the defense is doing well, is our offensive line bad? So you kind of gotta figure out exactly what it means. But yeah, first team offense was red, first team defense was black. I think most people kind of coming out of it would say the defense probably had the better day in the scrimmage. You had C.J. Allen and Mykel Williams both get intercept Carson Beck in this one. But one of the things I took away, I think Georgia's running game is going to be more explosive in 2024 than it was in 2023. And that's probably not surprising to a lot of people, adding Trevor Etienne. But even Andrew Paul had a couple of nice runs in this game. And Roderick Robinson, I think I'm sold on Roderick Robinson. This guy, we saw him play a little bit last year, number 0. He's UCLA commit for a while, had a monster senior season in high school, then flipped to Georgia. This dude's listed at 6 feet 240 as a true freshman with like 0 body fat. Like, this guy is a beast. So I'm really curious to see what he can do as a sophomore. He was one of the only freshmen, one of the few underclassmen that actually played outside of Kendall Milton and Dejon Edwards a year ago. So I'm really excited to see what Roderick Robinson can do. But Trevor Etienne definitely showed he looks like the best back on Georgia. A couple explosive runs in this one. So I think for the running game, I think Georgia fans just typically don't worry about the running game. Last year is probably, in just terms of raw talent, probably one of your least talented running back groups ever. And Georgia's running game was fine, all year. But if you get back to having some of those Sony Michels and DeAndre Swifts and Nick Chubbs and Gurleys of the world, it can be that much more dangerous. And obviously, seeing how good James Cook is as a second-year player in the NFL. But also, the transfer wide receivers, I think, is what a lot of people wanted to see. I think a lot of people want to see Gunnar Stockton kind of before I get to the receivers, kind of take control of he's like the true number 2 on the team. And, I think he looks fine. I think these type of settings aren't the best for him. It's kind of like Jalen Milroe. We can get to Alabama spring game later, but a guy who's got ability to make some plays with his legs, if it's not live motion, you're kind of never seeing exactly what he's truly capable of. So Stockton, I think he is the clear number 2, and Puglisi, the true freshman, has been injured, I think, the last few weeks, so he didn't play in the spring game. So I think you look at some of these transfer wide receivers. Colby Young is the one that everybody's talking about, the transfer from Miami. He just looks real solid. He had a catch that reminded me of a Marcus Rosemy-Jack Saint catch. And it's just, Rosemy-Jack Saint wasn't a superstar or anything, but he was a solid blocker, and he would just make those tough contested catches. And that's what Georgia's going to have to do. I think that's going to be the biggest question mark on Georgia's entire team, is that wide receiver tight end group. Not because they don't have talent, but just we might be coming off the most talented group we've ever seen. And not necessarily the deepest, but in terms of Brock Bowers, I think is probably the second best Georgia offensive player of my lifetime, behind Todd Gurley. He was just, elite when you see it. And then Ladd McConkey, we talked about, he's not really underrated anymore. People give him respect for how good of a wide receiver he was. So, and then I obviously said Rosemy-Jack Saint. So to lose 2 of the best playmakers Georgia's had, maybe of the entire Kirby Smart era, if you really think about it, in terms of pass catchers, obviously George Pickens probably has more talent than Ladd McConkey, but Bowers and McConkey are right there as far as the 2 most talented pass catchers Kirby Smart has had. So that's going to be a big area of just a question mark. But I think Georgia with Dominic Lovett, I don't know if you see that touchdown catch Dominic Lovett caught, was like Tyrone Prothro style behind the DB. It was a great
friend of the pod and coworker Graham Coffey of TPL Georgia got good video of that up close from today. So yeah, I saw it was pretty wild catch.
But yeah, so I think Georgia's receiver group with Dominic Lovett, with Dylan Bell, with like I was saying, with Colby Young stepping in. Obviously you still have London Humphreys and Michael Jackson Jr., Michael Jackson III from USC. So just a lot of bodies in that room. And then obviously Arian Smith is a guy that's also been, everyone wants to break out, but the biggest question marks on Georgia's team, I think, this year are that wide receiver group, and then on defense, I think it's got to be the defensive back room. But like I said, kind of along with those running backs, when you got a Kirby Smart coach team, you're just not really worried about the defensive backs. Like, yeah, they might not be superstars if it's like a transition year, but it's like you just know you're going to get a certain level of play from the defensive backs. One thing I took away was, so the first team defense is black, and Dalen Everett was on the black team. Julian Humphreys and Daniel Harris, who I think are perceived to be the number 2 and number 3 corners, both played for both teams. So that, I think that shows they're not necessarily sold on that position. So my hot take for you right here, sir: Ellis Robinson the fourth will start multiple games for Georgia in 2024, in my opinion. I think, and it's no disrespect to Daniel Harris or Julian Humphrey, but Ellis Robinson, and he didn't show out or do anything amazing in the spring game, but the way this guy looks, the way he fits in his uniform, some people have this guy as the number 1 player in the country coming out of high school. It's just hard to keep those guys off of the field, because you can get a lot of big time freshmen 5-stars coming into, Smile Munden's a one that comes out to mind, that this guy walks on the field in the spring game, you're like, oh wow, his body is not ready for Georgia. And then a year or two later, Smile Munden's just an absolute freak, and he's been in that strength and conditioning program for a couple years. I think you'll see a multiple true freshman linebackers in this class that they got a little bit of weight to put on, but they're just long athletes. Ellis Robinson looks like he's got an SEC body right now. So this guy's coming in as a true freshman, and that's usually the thing I notice most is the lack of muscle definition in the arms. It's okay, this guy is still a senior high schooler basically, and he should still be a high schooler in April if he was graduating like a normal student. But so I think Ellis Robinson is one that and it's not like a hot take or anything. He's obviously a 5-star. Everyone knows about him, but I think you're going to see him emerge as the season comes along.
Interesting. So do you think he starts against Clemson or no?
I don't think he starts the opener. And maybe it's, maybe the other guys are playing so well he never gets a shot. But I think that Dalen Everett, I mean, he's the proven commodity right now, and he's far from proven. He was basically the one weak spot in Georgia's secondary a year ago. He was the guy that teams picked on. And you've seen guys that, like a Tyson Campbell, the same thing, be the guy that got picked on and emerge as being a borderline first-round pick. So, that's going to happen when you play at a young age. But I think that that other DB spot still hasn't been locked up really yet. So I think that's just it's gonna be hard to keep a guy that talented off the field.
I like it. Speaking of breakouts and guys who might end up starting and having a big breakout, one of the guys you were talking about, the receivers and Colby Young and replacing Lad McConkey and Brock Bowers, and we've talked about this offseason that what's interesting about Georgia in a lot of ways this year is that, really the last 2 years, is they are addressing their wide receiver room through the portal, because Bowers, Ladd, and Pickens and guys like that before them were all in-house guys, Marcus Rosemary, Jack Saint. Now they're really transfer heavy with Dominic Lovett, with London Humphreys, and with Ra Thomas. They're very transfer heavy, which is okay, but it also makes it interesting that they built their entire room now really through the portal. But there is one exception, and 247 did a college breakout player candidate list for 2024, and one of the names on the list, Arian Smith. When you saw that, Matt Green, and based on what you saw at G-Day, and when you think about where the pecking order is right now for Georgia's wide receiver room, are you buying? Because I feel like the last 3 off seasons, it's been kind of like Arian Smith coming out party, and this is the year Arian Smith breaks out. Like, are you still falling into that line of thinking, or are you kind of like, I don't know if I can still just put him in as a breakout candidate based on what we've seen through the first couple of years here?
I mean, I guess it depends on what do we.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas podcast. Hell yeah.